I say my loves. Once again, this is your girl, the Queen, coming at you with another informative video. This is a video that was done by the late Jordan Maxwell, who was another genius. And this is about the hidden meaning, meanings behind words and symbols. I think y'all will find this quite interesting, family. You know, I do. But everybody not be on the same level as I am.
Once you begin to see how words and terms and symbols are used, and the powers that be in this world have set up a world of symbols and emblems and terms and catchphrases. Once you understand how this system works, for the first time, the world opens up to you. All of it is right in front of you. But if you don't understand what the words are, what the words mean, you're never going to figure out how this stuff works. There's a very sinister, frightening, interesting symbolism that has been imposed upon this country, and the people have no idea in the world what's going on. And I will guarantee you, no matter how educated you might think you are, I will guarantee you, you have no idea in the world how the world actually works. You need to understand that when even on your check, when you're writing a check, the place where you put your name on a check, look at that line, what you're signing on, and get a magnifying glass, and you will find that's not a solid line to sign your name on. That is written, it's a typewritten sentence that's been honed down to microscopic size. Get a magnifying glass and read on a check what is said where you sign your name. One of the most interesting symbols in Druidism was a magic wand. Magic wands were always made out of the wood of a holly tree, made out of Hollywood. And we're still seeing the magic of the wood of the holly tree. Hollywood. Hollywood. Motion pictures, television. I have discovered many years ago that words and magical systems dominate the world that we live in. There is, in point of fact, a magical matrix at work. I've always been interested in the occult. Occult is simply a word meaning hidden. And so much of our powers in this world and the way things work are hidden. And the more one looks at this subject of how the world actually works, you begin to see that there's a magical system. And I'm telling you, there really is a magical system dominating the world of the Western civilization. And for 1,000 years before the Roman Empire existed in Northern Europe, basically Western Europe, there was a magical priesthood called the Druids. And the Druids still even exist to this day. And it was a very legitimate political, social, educational, religious institution dominating Europe for thousands of years. And they were referred to as the Druids. They were actually from the Phoenician Canaanite system in the Middle East. The Phoenician Canaanites formed the basis for the ancient Druidic system, and that's even older. But in the ancient Druidic system, there were many powerful symbols and emblems. One of the most interesting symbols in Druidism was a magic wand, like Merlin the magician with his magic wand. Magic wands were always made out of the wood of a holly tree. It was made out of Hollywood. And we're still seeing the magic of the wood of the holly tree. Hollywood, motion pictures, television. And once you begin to see the symbols and realize that the symbols for the national coats of arms for countries, the flags, the seals, the presidential seals, the emblems for the logos and emblems on corporations, especially the corporate emblems for motion pictures and television companies like Columbia, broadcasting system. CBS has the I. The Colombian system goes back to the Colombian faction of the Illuminati back in the early 1700s, not the late 1700s. And you begin to see why space shuttle is called Columbia. You have Columbia University, Columbia Pictures, Columbia Broadcasting. Columbia is a very interesting word, and it's connected to the Jesuits. Once you begin to see how words and terms and symbols are used, and of course symbols are extraordinarily important in world affairs, all of a sudden it opens up, as I said, a whole new perspective on how stuff is happening. Let me give you an example of how words, my friend William Henry says you put an S in front of the word word and it becomes swords. The words are swords. They are cutting things. Humans are word responsive creatures. We respond to people's words. When you begin to see how words are used, let me give you an example of the magic. Why do you have to go to court? You go to court because you play basketball on a court. You play tennis on a court. How do you play tennis on a court? You play with a racket. Why? Because the people that develop it know it's a racket. That's where we get the term. Consequently, you need to understand that the words which are used by the systems under which we live are not by chance. In a court, the whole idea in a court is to put the ball back in the other guy's court. So this team of attorneys, they stand up and throw the ball back at the other team. Now the ball's in their court. They have to get up and throw the ball back into that court. The judge wears a black robe. Why does a judge wear a black robe? Well, the same reason Catholic priests wear black robes. Rabbis wear black robes. You wear a black robe. For many years, young people graduating from university and college wear a black robe. What's this stuff with a black robe? Let me give you an example of how this stuff works, and it's a very quick example. There are two basic kinds of law under the law of magic. There are two kinds of laws that govern the earth. One is called the law of the land, L-A-N-D. And we've heard that term, law of the land. Why do you use that term, the law of the land? Because that's where people live, is on land. But there's an opposing law which is far more important, far, far more powerful. It is called the law of water. It was developed under the old Druidic system in Europe, which can trace its history back to the Roman Empire through the Vatican, and ultimately back to the Phoenician Canaanites in the Middle East, of what we today call Phoenicia. Cana was called back what we call today Israel and Lebanon. Syria, that was called Phoenicia, Cana. And the Phoenician Canaanites, the very word Cana, which we've all heard in relation to the Bible, Cana is a Phoenician word meaning bankers, merchant bankers. Well, the Phoenician Canaanites set up a system of merchant banking and had their Phoenician Canaanite symbols and words connected to their societies, their banking societies. We're talking about in the Middle East. And then through the Greece and ultimately through Rome, and then into Britannia, and ultimately into this country comes an ancient Druidic Phoenician Canaanite magical system of finance, education, and all of it is right in front of you. But if you don't understand what the words are, what the words mean, you're never going to figure out how this stuff works. We all have a cursory understanding of what we think is going on. That's not it. You need to understand that when even on your check, when you're writing a check, the place where you put your name on a check, look at that line, what you're signing on, and get a magnifying glass, and you will find that's not a solid line to sign your name on. That is written. It's a typewritten sentence that's been honed down to microscopic size. Get a magnifying glass and read on a check what is said where you sign your name. That's why the attorneys tell you, you better check the small print. The small print is ultra small. Where you sign your name on a check is saying something. Go back and read it. You need to understand that according to the old Phoenician Canaanite system, which we call today our judicial educational and judicial system. There is no law in this country or in the Western world, no law, federal, state, county, city, commercial, it makes no difference. There is no law on the books anywhere in this country that applies to you as an individual creature. There is no law because the people who designed the system thousands of years ago realized that there's two of you. There's the one that your mother gave birth to, that God created, so to speak. And even your mother didn't know what you were doing. Even your father and your mother have no idea what you're thinking or what you will do. You don't even know. So consequently, they have no control over you, your flesh and blood self. But somebody has to control this show. And so consequently, the ancient Phoenician Canaanites developed a system by which they would assign to every person a second you. And this is the way it works in America. There is two of you. Just as there are two states in this country, of every state is two states. You have the state of Nevada and Nevada State. You have Cal State, California State, and State of California. Not the same thing at all. California State, according to the law, is one thing. State of California is totally different. Has nothing to do with each other at all. It's the difference between being a lawyer and an attorney. Has nothing to do with them at all. It's totally separate words, means totally separate things. Consequently, when you understand how words and terms are used and symbols are used, then we go back to the idea of the court. And as I said, there is no law in this country on any books that applies to you. None. All law in the Western civilization applies only to cooperations, co-ops. All law applies only to corporations, period. Across the board, no other, end of sentence. Consequently, there is no law that applies to you personally, so consequently, the system has made each one of you a corporation. And how now do you distinguish which one, when someone's addressing you, that they're addressing you as the one that your mother gave birth to, or the corporate you? Very simple. According to British law, when you sign your name, upper and lower case, that is applying to your body. Your flesh and blood self is spelled, according to British and American law, upper and lower case, capital letter, lowercase. That's you, your personal self. There is no law that can be applied to an upper and lowercase name, period. No law at all can be applied to an upper and lowercase name because there is no law over you. Therefore, every piece of important bills, insurance, driver's license, identification, taxes, I don't care what it is. If it's a piece of business, period, in any kind of way, shape, or form, your name must, by law, international maritime admiralty banking law, your name must appear in all capital letters. You will never get a bill or anything that has your name upper and lowercase because there is no law that applies to an upper and lowercase name, period. So if Sears is going to send you a bill, you go into Baskin Robbins or Sears and you order a pair of shoes, what are you going to do? They're going to give you a ticket and you're going to put it on your bill, and then they're expecting you to pay the bill. And consequently, they're going to charge you. Well, that's the same thing. You go into a courtroom. They're going to read out the charges. And the cop gave you the ticket. And you have been charged with speeding or whatever. And therefore, you have to pay the charge. Well, once you understand that in America, according to our laws in America, you cannot pay a bill. Did you know that? According to international banking law, Americans cannot pay a bill. So when you say, well, I got to pay this, I'll pay that bill, well, that's a term that we use. But in point of fact, lawfully, You cannot pay a bill. You can discharge a debt. You cannot pay a bill. So consequently, you need to understand, what do you mean discharge a debt? Now it gets back to the court again. Now it gets back to the symbols and emblems of why the judge wears a black robe. It has to do with the planet Saturn. Saturn is the god that inhibits. He's the inhibitor and the law god, the god of law who inhibits, who holds back. He holds back everything and teaches you a lesson the hard way. Saturn. And women were told in the ancient world to listen to their god Saturn, who incidentally was called Lord of the Rings. Okay? And consequently, they're still making movies in Hollywood on Lord of the Rings, the planet Saturn. Women were told to listen to their god, the Lord of the Rings, so they were wearing an ear ring. Men were to get married before Saturn, their god, so they would wear a wedding ring. Consequently, the king would be crowned before Saturn. Saturn would be the round crown or the corona, the ring. Saturn, the god who is the inhibitor, the god of occult law, the mystical god Saturn, Lord of the Rings, who is in charge of and controls all occult law in the universe. This is why today we know that Saturn was referred to as El, E-L. El is a name that was given to the planet Saturn. And therefore, if you are worshiping Saturn, you represent the law, you are referred to in church today as an elder. How did you get to be an elder? You got to be an elder because you were one of the elites. How did you get to be an elite? You got elected because through elections, all of our system is based on occult, mystical words and terms going back to the planet Saturn, going back to the Phoenician Canaanite system of banking. Incidentally, where do you find a bank? We go to banks all the time. Where do you find a bank? Banks are on both sides of a river. They're called river banks. What does a river bank do? It directs the flow of the currency. Your money is referred to as the currency. This is why when you go to court, you have the current, electricity, because it's the juice. And if you don't have the juice, you don't have it. So if you don't have the juice, you can't capitalize. And capital is a Latin word meaning money. There's a very sinister, frightening, interesting symbolism that has been imposed upon this country, and the people have no idea in the world what's going on. All goes back to the Phoenician Canaanite system, ancient Phoenicia, ancient Babylonian Sumeria, and this is why the work of Zecharia Sitchin is so important. This is where the kings of England get their concept of the divine right of kings. What are you talking about, divine right? All of this is part of a subject which I call ancient mysticism that dominates the Western civilization. Yeah, here it is, Rome. Rome in the first century. I don't know if you know this, but in the first century Rome's seat of power, where Caesar ruled from, was called Capitoline Hill. Capitoline Hill. And the temple of Juno Moneta was a part of Capitoline Hill. Juno Moneta, which is where we get Juneau, Alaska. Juno Moneta. Not realizing when you see the President of the United States up on the hill, this is all Rome. Okay. Yeah, domes. Domes are very important. The word dome comes from a Latin word domus. Domus gives us domesticated, dominate, Dominican Republic, domineering, Domus. Domus meaning the presence of the divine. Domus. The presence of God, the presence of divine. Domus. And you'll find domes everywhere. Churches have domes. Religious buildings incorporate a dome. The Vatican dome. St. Peter's Domus. Here we have from a publication showing Jesus giving the keys to Peter, the keys of heaven, the two keys. And you will see in the back the Vatican. Domus. So Jesus is giving the keys to Peter. The United States government has the same identical dome as the one in Vatican. Identical. It's because this government is dominated by international maritime admiralty law, the law of international banks. International maritime admiralty law is based on Vatican canon law. Vatican canon law is the law of banks and money. And consequently, that's why the Pope has a Swiss guard. Switzerland is the bankers of the world. Consequently, you need to understand what these symbols mean. Let's see if there's something else on here. No. Yeah, there it is. A mortarboard derived from a cap worn by Roman Catholic clergy. A mortarboard is now a symbol. The red square. These are squares. Here's the Pope bowing before a mafia. You got to ask yourself, how come the Pope has to bow to get the square on his head? You better check this out and figure out, why does the Pope have to bow to politicians? The square, the red square. Isn't that what where Russia was, the Moscow was ruled from? The red square? The red square. You find that in the Vatican, the red square. The Nazis used the red square. I mean, even Union Bank uses the red square. And incidentally, the Union Bank goes back to Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler founded a bank with the gold he got from Jews. He founded a bank called the Reichsstadt All-German Union Bank. The Reichsstadt All-German Union Bank. Today, the Reichsstadt All-German Union Bank is known in our country as Union Bank. Union Bank was founded by Adolf Hitler. But don't take this personal. It's just business. Understand? Here is a red shield, Rothschild. And what do you see as a symbol of fascism? Fascism was an authoritarian political movement. The last sentence, it says, its name was derived from a fasces, a Roman symbol for authority consisting of a bundle of rods and an axe. Political life. In most cases, fascists have come to power after a nation has suffered an economic collapse, a military defeat, or some other disaster. The Fascist Party wins mass support by promising to revive the economy and restore national pride. Say it again. When? Okay. Political life under fascism. In most cases, fascists have come to power after a nation has suffered an economic collapse, a military defeat, or some other disaster. The Fascist Party wins mass support by promising to revive the economy and restore national pride. Where have we heard this crap before? The people running this country are nothing but the patsies for international fascist Nazism. They are fascist murderers all. And one day, there's going to come a time when the divine justice is going to be having its way on this earth, and people like George Bush and all of the other fascist, Nazi, underworld, mafiosi murderers are going to bite the dust. You can bet on it. God has watched the coming and going of Hitler's for thousands of years, and it hasn't impressed him a bit. And the people that are running this government today, they're on their way out too, very soon. Personal liberty. Personal liberty is severely limited under a fascist government. Here's a fascist. You'll see it underneath. It's everywhere throughout the world, especially in South America, Italy, France, Italy again, Benito Mussolini. You'll see the fasci. Fascism of Italian domination. Here's Kurt Waldheim, fascist Nazi, ended up being the head of the United Nations. I don't know if that tells you about the UN. And here's the Pope with his fascist Nazi friend. Both of them are grinning because they both know what they're doing, and they know you don't know what they're doing. And that's why they're both smiling. I put the Pope in the same place with Adolf Hitler and the other fascist Nazis. I know. I've done 42 years of research on the Roman system of fascism, Nazism, and I can tell you the papacy is the bottom line if you want to talk about fascism. Why does the Pope wear a Jewish yarmulke? Ever thought about that? Where's the Jewish yarmulke? Why? Here at the Vatican, Cardinal Pacelli, who later became Pope Pius XII, he signs a concordance. Eugenio Pacelli, now Vatican Secretary of State, presides over the signing of a concordat between Germany and the Vatican in 1933. The Vatican signed contracts with the Nazis. There were two of them. They were called concordances. Now, how many people know that? The Pope signs contracts with Adolf Hitler. Here's Benito Mussolini in the Vatican signing contracts with the Vatican. Again, here's another cardinal meeting with all of the fascists on the left. Here are the priests hailing Hitler. Here's Pacelli. Now here's the Cardinal Nuncio, Papal Nuncio in Germany talking to Adolf Hitler. Again, the fasci. Here it is on American coins, the fasci. Here it is in Rome. Take a good look at the fasci on that symbol. Here it is in America. Here it is on the American dime. It's a traditional symbol of republicanism, of fasci as its symbol. Now, Republicans have always used the fasci because they crawl on their knees before the Pope and the mafia. You see on both sides of the podium, fascis. That's a fasci. And you'll see it with the president and on both sides of the podium. We can have the lights now. I think is important and will make the point. On the first day of summer, the sun is as high in the northern sky as it's going to get. It's not going any further north than the first day of summer. It is directly overhead as high in the northern hemisphere as it's going to get. Each day, from the first day of summer, each day it moves imperceptibly. It moves 1 degree southward each day, going southward. When it hits the halfway point, it is now crossing over the equator at the halfway point, and now it is going to fall And that's why we call it fall or autumn. Fall because the sun is now falling. It's going. And consequently, it keeps moving until it hits the halfway, which it crosses over the equator. Now it is the spring in the southern equator, and in the northern hemisphere, it is now fall, coming of winter. But as I said, but in Rio and in Brazil, it is now spring because it's going to go 3 more months until it hits the first day of winter. And the first day of winter, the sun is as low in the southern sky as it's going to get. And that's the first day of summer for Rio. That's why the birds and smart people with money fly south. If you got money, you go south, follow the sun, right? So consequently, the sun, which was doing just fine, it was really hot and doing great. And then when it reached the halfway point, the constellation that it hits every fall is the constellation of Scorpio. Scorpio is the constellation that begins autumn, and therefore it's this kiss of death. The scorpion has kissed God's son, and now he's going to be led to his death in Capricorn. He's going to die. He is fallen. The great Son of God is fallen, and he's going to fall all the way down to the southern hemisphere until he hits the first day of winter, which is December 22nd. Yes. On December 22nd, the sun rises on the lowest latitude, on the lowest point in the southern sky. Now follow what I'm saying. The sun rises on the lowest degree on the 22nd. On the 23rd, the sun rises on the same identical degree. It's so perceptive, the U.S. Navy has instruments to tell you. It did not move 1 degree south. It did not move 1 degree north. It's on the same identical degree. On the 24th, it rises, and it's still on the same identical degree. Therefore, the ancient Egyptians knew that, and they said God's son was dead for 3 days. But on the 4th day, which was December 25th, the United States Navy devices will tell you that the sun moved 1 degree northward. 1 small degree northward. It's just enough because the ancient people said anything that was dead for 3 days and has just moved 1 degree northward is born again. It's come back to life. Now it is on its way back to the northern hemisphere. And consequently, when it gets to the next quarter point, which is spring, and at spring it crosses back over the equator on its way back to coming back to full grown and full into the northern hemisphere. Consequently, when you die today, we say the same thing the ancient Egyptians said. When someone dies, we say grandmother passed last night, grandfather passed away, or uncle passed on. Always the word associated with death in the ancient world was passed. You passed last night. Grandmother passed on. But in the Egyptian, they said that when you died, you left from one world and went into another world. So you passed over into a next world. So when you died, they said grandfather passed over last night. And I've even heard that term. Grandmother passed over last night. Why? Because the sun, which was brilliant in the summer, it hit at halfway point, it crossed over the equator, so it passed over the equator, going to the full day of full summer in the southern hemisphere. In the spring, it's coming back, and it passes over the equator again, coming back. And in the ancient world, there was a celebration in the northern hemisphere because the sun, which was dead in winter, has been reborn on December 25th and has now come back to life. And they called it the Passover. So that the Passover is nothing more than the sun passing over the equator. The Passover. Okay? So consequently, when you're, the very holy, the Passover, what are you talking about? Sun worship, airhead? Wake up, that's all it is, just worship of the sun. Passing over. And so consequently, the Passover happens on the first week of spring. Well, isn't that strange? That it would happen in the first week of spring. Now, of course, Christians would not want to have anything to do with this because this is a Jewish celebration of the Passover. So Christians wouldn't have anything to do with that. But we're still going to be worshiping the sun. But let's say that instead of the Passover, let's say that God's Son is, say, resurrected. Let's say he's resurrected and has come back to life. Well, the Son has been resurrected, has passed over. And so Christians go out on the first day of Easter, Ishtar, and have an Easter sunrise service. Why? Because that's all it is sun worship. You're worshiping the sun on a sunrise service because the sun has passed over, and the Jews call it Passover, Christians call it resurrection. Wake up, it's just sun worship. And until such time as you understand that God does not have anything to do with ignorance. It has nothing to do with the pageantry and all the crap that we have been fed by government, religion, politics, church, and all of it. It's all manipulation. What we need to understand is that there is a divine presence in the universe that demands justice and demands intelligence. And that's what I'm here to do, to help people to understand, to get back in tune with the divine nature of the universe. And I believe that that's going to be required very soon, because when all the systems break down and the Christians for the first time begin to think about it, where is Jesus? I would have thought he would be back by now. You need to understand that there's a very powerful story in the New Testament that is telling us what God's thoughts are. But you need to understand it is symbolic, and there's a powerful story there. And one day, if I am invited back, I will do nothing more than for 4 hours do a whole theological discussion about the New Testament and the real story that's encoded in the New Testament, because I believe it's a very powerful story, but it's not the one you think it is. So consequently, my last comments are, I do not wish to offend, I wish to educate, because I believe that's what the divine presence in the universe would want, is truth. Know the truth and it will set you free. And I want to thank you.
We have a special treat. We have Jordan Maxwell coming on the air with us, and it's a great honor. Jordan, are you there, sir?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me.
Oh, welcome to the show.
And represented by two gods, Re, the sun god, and Osiris, the god of the netherworld. Re and Osiris stand also for two aspects of time or eternity. Nechech, the time of endless repetition and regeneration, is represented by Re, the sun god, especially in his morning form of Chepri. And yet, the time of endless duration and continuation is represented by Osiris, the lord of the night.
We have a special treat. We have Jordan Maxwell coming on the air with us, and it's a great honor. Jordan, are you there, sir?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me.
Oh, welcome to the show. We're so glad you could make it. It's absolutely an honor to have you back here once again.
Thank you. So where are we on anything?
Where are we? Well, I wanted to bring you on specifically to start off with a very deep question that I've always had, and that I've noticed seems to be out there in the alternative research community. And you've done some fantastic work on looking at astrology and astrotheology, as well as ancient history, ancient religion, geopolitics, etc. And I wanted to start off with the question. A lot of people bring this up because there seems to be a kind of a division taking place within the alternative truth community, where some scholars look at what you see in a lot of these ancient texts, and there's many that we could cite, that talk about visitation from advanced intelligences, etc. And some camps look at that as purely just some type of allegory. It's just astrotheology, and there's no actual factual history to it. And then there's the other camp that thinks that every single thing written in these ancient books is 100% true in one way or another, and it's all factual history. And they disregard the whole concept of astrotheology. So I wondered if we can maybe dig into this a little bit and try to help people understand some of the differences that are there, because I personally think that it's a little bit of both. But I wanted to bring you on tonight, Jordan, so we could see and get your take on that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it is a mixed bag because I have, first of all, I should say, I have no respect for science whatsoever. There are a few scientists that I know of that are extraordinarily brilliant people that I have the highest of respect for. But science in general in the Western world, I have no respect for. They're like journalists.
The angel Gabriel was sent from God to the city of Galilee.
Every Sunday, in every corner of the world,
Virgin betrothed to man.
people gather to hear.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it is a mixed bag because I have, first of all, I should say, I have no respect for science whatsoever. There are a few scientists that I know of that are extraordinarily brilliant people that I have the highest of respect for. But science in general in the Western world, I have no respect for.
Y'all got to
They're like
overlook that part. I was trying to
or
plug up my
TV
phone
figures for them
and
concerned.
mess around and change it, so I had to change it back real quick.
Today, science itself has become a religion. It's not scientific at all. It's a religion. It has its holy books. It has its saints, the holy saints.
Shout out to you,
It
Keith
has
Powell.
its gods.
Keith Powell. How you doing, love?
And you have to bow down to the gods and to sprinkle incense on the altar, and you have to mimic whatever they taught you in school, you know, to get your degree, so that you could become a scientist. And then, of course, if once you become a scientist, you're going to mold your life all around. You're getting your money from the government and getting your.
I'm gonna take a minute to shout out to my people that don't came in here to holler at me. Welcome. Let's see, shout out to I don't know if Big Dog Philly's still in the house or not, but I'm shout out to Big Dog Philly. Shout out to Alexis. Shout out to my girl to Terry Screw Loose. Shout out to my girl Cherry B, Paul Games, and let's see, Kiddies. I really appreciate y'all coming to holler at your girl tonight. You know, y'all making my evening. I hope y'all enjoying this content.
Contributions from government to your college, and so that's how you pay your bills. And so naturally, science will always cater to the powers that be that print the money and are in charge. So it's very simple. It's the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. And since since the university is paying you as a scientist, and the university is getting their taxes and everything from and tax relief and their money from the big international banking cartels that are financing the university, so that the university will teach you what the international cartels want you to know and want you to understand. And so you study hard at the university, and you get a degree, and that degree means that you now have a work permit. You can go out.
Jordan Maxwell putting it down, ain't he? This man breaking it down like he fired.
And get a job in your university or in some kind of an educational institution and call yourself a scientist, because you've got a work permit. It's called a degree from university. And therefore you can now make enough money to pay for your home and your car and your family. And so not obviously we wouldn't want to do anything to rock the boat and to cause any problems by you actually reading something and doing something on your own without anybody telling you, and making some discoveries of your own by yourself. and finding out that something is not true, or if you find something is not true, you need to keep your mouth shut because you will lose your, you'll lose your tenure, and the college and university will fire you, and then you'll find yourself out in the street, and then for the first time you will discover how useless your really is. You'll discover how useless your degree really is when the powers that be decide that they've had enough of you. You won't be able to get a job at Sears. I don't care how smart you thought you were. The only reason why you are given a degree and are promoted is because you're promoting the party line. But if you happen to be extraordinarily brilliant, and you are learning things that nobody else knows, and are trying to explain things to the world of science, well, we know. We've already had too much, 5,000 years of experience. The powers that be on this earth are not interested in science. They're interested in everyone being in compliance. So everyone believes what we tell them to believe. And if we catch you teaching somebody something we didn't tell you, it's like in the same thing with Christianity. King James comes out with a Bible. It's called the Authorized Version. And why? Because he didn't authorize you to go reading anything else. And so science is like a religion, while religion should be a science. Spirituality should be scientifically looked at, but it isn't. And so it's relegated to TV show preachers and all that silly nonsense. But spirituality, very few people have ever touched spirituality. All kinds of people have religions, but very few people have ever really looked at the word spirituality, what it means. So when it comes to science and religion and government, I understand what's going on. It's all a game, and it's all commerce. It's all business. And if you don't go along with the ideas that are being popular right now, then you won't have a job. You're out. And I don't care if you got 14 doctors, doesn't matter. You're out. You're finished. It's over. You can't get a job anywhere. So I understand how it works. When you're talking about where we come from and where the human race comes from, there are overwhelming in your face facts of life that scientists around the world know, but they're not about to talk about. Because I talk with a lot of different people, and you'd be surprised how people react when you're talking to them by themselves. When no one's around, you're talking to them by themselves is one thing. But if you get them in a crowd or get them in a group at a restaurant where there's 4 or 5 others in the same discipline, now it's different. So if you're talking to one lawyer over coffee or over a drink in a bar in the back part of the bar, just you and him, and you're talking, that's one thing. He'll tell you the real truth. But if you're going to have dinner with 6 other lawyers, and now you talk to him about it, it's going to be a whole different situation. Because he's not about to say anything that everybody else has already, all the other lawyers know. We don't talk about that. And whatever that subject is, we don't bring it up and we don't comment on it. And everybody here at the table knows that. But if you talk to them by themselves, well, late at night in a car parked out here on the boulevard somewhere at night, that's when they'll tell you the real truth. So that's why I don't have any respect for scientists or religionists or government or any of the rest of these institutions, because I know how they work. They all protect each other, and they all have their own holy gospel, and they all know what they're supposed to teach, and so nobody wants to rock the boat. Yeah. I mean, we're all under citizenship, and so that's why I said I don't really have any respect for on any of those sides of science. But having said that, there are some scientists that I consider to be absolutely mind-boggling, brilliant people doing brilliant work, but most likely you will never hear of them. And because they're not out there on TV like Billy Graham and TBN and dancing around the stage, worshiping the Lord, and making hundreds of billions of dollars a year, entertaining the poor people of the world with all this silly nonsense religion. That's what you'll see. You'll see all the Benny Hinn's and all the religious leaders dancing around the stage with their effeminate hairdos and their diamond rings, but they're not telling you anything. It's just a big act. At the end of the day, it's just business. That's what the mafia says. Nothing personal, just business. We're talking money. TBN, Trinity Broadcasting, we're talking money, period. Millions a day. And so, any con man will tell you that if you're going to con someone, you have to find out what they like and what they don't like. And then
I hope y'all enjoying this. If you're enjoying this, y'all put a one in the chat.
con them by agreeing with them. Whatever it is they like, that's what you like. Whatever it is they don't like, that's what you don't like. And so you get their confidence because they like you, because you're like them. No, you're not like them. You're a scumbag, but you are acting like you are like them, and you are believe the way they do. Why? Because of money. You're ripping them off. And so that's why today people all over this country have lost their homes, they've lost their jobs, they've lost their income, they've lost their freedoms. Now the only thing left to lose is their minds.
If they don't go
People
along
of America
with
are
the
losing
agenda,
their minds because that's the only thing left to lose. They've been ripped off, lied to, cheated, and educated to be stupid. And the best you got is football or the reverends jumping around TV or football. And the government is going to rip you off. The churches are going to rip you off. And banks are going to rip you off. I don't think there's anything out there in any institution that's not going to rip you off. So you better understand that the world that you live in is very, very evil and very, very dark. And I like what's his name? Einstein said. Albert Einstein said the world is very, very dangerous. Not because bad people do bad things, but because good people do nothing.
Yeah.
So I understand how the world works. I understand it's all corrupt, and I understand that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so that's why today we're living in a world of absolute, total dictatorship, fascist dictatorship of power. It has nothing to do with humanity. It has nothing to do with anything decent or holy, all that stuff about America being the land of the free and home of the brave and with liberty and justice for all. There is none of that. It's all God. Oh, God. It's only power. Might makes right. Period. End of sentence. Either you got the money or you don't.
That part.
So, I've always been interested in where did we come from? And what are we doing here right now, and where are we going? I ask people all the time, where were you? I don't care about your body. Because what you need to realize is that your body is no different than any other human male body. All men are designed the same way. All women are designed the same way. So there's nothing new about the female and the male body.
We all one.
And all human brains, whether it be male or female, adult or child, all human brains are human brains. You line them all up, 60 of them in a row, and you can't tell who they were because all brains are the same. Man, and all bodies are the same. So what makes you, you? Well, your personality, your spirit, so to speak. Whatever it is, it's not your body, it's not your brain. It's who you are. Well, you are a personality, a spirit. So my question is, where were you 5,000 years ago? Were you around? Because you obviously are somebody. Well, where were you before you were you today? Where were you? And so that brings up the subject that you were talking about. How did we get here? Who created us? And all that kind of thing.
Tonight, I am speaking with Jordan Maxwell, and we are very honored to have him on once again. He was so kind to come on and do the first show that I had on this network, and so I definitely owe him a debt of gratitude for that and for coming back on here and doing another hour with me. I couldn't be more honored. So we just started speaking in the beginning about some of the things that are going on the planet, who's running the show, the fact that we have corruption and lies everywhere, the fact that everything has basically been turned into another of religion and collectivism where everybody can just believe what they're told and not really critically analyze information on their own. And Jordan was also breaking down something very important, which is that, we need to understand who we are and not just look at our bodies as just some kind of hunk of meat, that we are imbued with spirit. We are connected, and we can have a higher form of intelligence that we can connect to and eventually, hopefully, realize our full potential. And Jordan, we were just getting into the idea of our origins. And when we talk about origins, some people get confused because they think, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the physicality? Are we talking about the spirituality? And I think that when we talk about some of the things that are spoken of in these ancient texts, there's a little bit of both in there. And so maybe we can get into your take on maybe physically how, what happened to the human race. I mean, we are connected and there are similarities within nature, but in terms of what Darwin was talking about, how we are just directly related to, chimpanzees and apes, etc., there seems to be a lot more in terms of what a human being is physically than what science is maybe giving credit for. So maybe we can get into human origins there.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it'd be important to point out that Charles Darwin, which is interesting, a lot of people don't know this, that Charles Darwin never really wrote anything about evolution, period. And I just think that's interesting, that Charles Darwin is credited with coming up with the idea of origins of the species and all that kind of thing, and evolution, etc. But in point of fact, he never wrote anything. He didn't know much about it at all. The Charles Darwin family were very wealthy in England, and they financed a young man named Wallace, Henry Wallace. And Wallace was fascinated with the idea that animals, have reproduced themselves in different ways, and that evolution, the whole idea of evolution was Wallace's idea. And so the Darwin family were interested in the subject, and so they financed him to travel around, all around to do his research. So Wallace was doing all the research, all the work, writing all the books, collecting all of these samples of all the butterflies and animals and insects. So Henry Wallace was doing all the work, but the Darwin family was financing him. And then one day, Wallace realized that he had gotten sick because he had gotten some kind of influenza or something from roaming around the jungles. He had caught something, which is easy to do, and was dying. And so he contacted Charles Darwin and the family and told them that he was dying and that they need to come quick and, and pick up all of his work to protect it. And so Darwin came to him, I think it was in the West Indies, and came over and got there in time before Wallace died, and picked up all of his papers and books and all of his, all of his samples and on the glass and all that, and brought it back to England. And since Wallace passed away, well, he's already gone now, so who knows? So Wallace started publishing books with his name on it, when in point of fact, he never wrote anything. It was Henry Wallace did it. That's an excellent book out. There's been actually 2 or 3 books out on the subject, tracing this whole story. But one of them that I think is the best of the group is called A Delicate Arrangement. A Delicate Arrangement. The real story of Charles Darwin. Well, anyway, I don't know if you've ever heard of the work of, wait a minute, Zecharia Sitchin.
Oh, of course, yes.
Well, I was in business with Zecharia Sitchin. I was actually in business with him, and I was one of the people who was sending him around the world, and I helped him get some of his books published, and so we were business partners at one time. So I had a lot of opportunities to sit and talk with him privately about his work and what he knew that he hasn't told anyone. I can tell you one thing: he did know a lot more than what he ever wrote. And but we talked about this subject about who created us, where do we come from, et cetera, et cetera. My take on this is just my personal opinion, which has nothing to do with anything. It's just my view. I think that we are somebody else's experiment. The book I read many years ago, back in 1959, was The Complete Works of Charles Fort. That was a very, very important book to me at 19 years old. It really turned my life around reading that book. It's still available today. You can get it in any good bookstore. You can order it. It's called The Complete Works of Charles Fort, F-O-R-T, Charles Fort. Very, very interesting and important book. But what Charles Fort said in the forewords of his book is he said he believed that we humans were somebody else's test tube. We was a test tube creation. Somebody created us. Well, that's what the Bible says, and that's what many of the ancient texts from all the Aztecs and Mayas, the Incas and Toltec peoples and the Egyptians and the Hindus and God knows all the rest of the ancient cultures of the world, they all talk about they who came here and created us. Now, I am of the opinion that we were created because logic alone dictates that, so that anytime you hear someone calling himself a scientist who puts down the concept of creation, you need to understand that they're thinking in terms of Marxist-Leninism. They're thinking in terms of what we call Marxist-Leninist or communist philosophy, which says there is no God, there is no creator, not period, none of it. The whole thing is a bunch of bull. So therefore, you need to understand that the scientific community is usually, most often, left-wing, Marxist-Leninist. We don't know that. We're not supposed to use those terms because people don't know what it means. But universities today in America are filled with left-wing, Marxist-Leninist, Bolshevik, social communists, etc., and they have no regard for wisdom, knowledge, spiritual truth, intellectual, spiritual knowledge, anything that has to do with the upbuilding of the human spirit by knowledge, wisdom, and study, etc. They're not interested in. They're interested only in one thing, and that's international socialism, or what we refer to as the World Revolutionary Movement. I understand Marxist-Leninism. I understand the Communist Party of Russia. I understand what we call today the Republic and the Democratic Party is itself a Marxist-Leninist movement in America, but most people don't know that. I've studied it for 53 years, so I know what's going on. Therefore, I would say that for me, and it's just my opinion, and it's a subjective opinion, I am totally convinced that we were created by someone. And the reason why, the logic is very simple. If you were out in the middle of the Sahara Desert, 4 days out, and you're hundreds and hundreds of miles from any civilization anywhere, out in the real middle of the Gobi Desert or out in the middle of the Sahara, and you're roaming around, and you happen to see a watch laying on the ground, you pick up the watch. What does that watch feel besides the time? The very fact that you found the watch out in the middle of nowhere should tell you, if you have 500 brain cells or more all going in the same direction, it would tell you someone has been here. Obviously, the watch did not walk out here itself, and it wasn't created by God and dropped down from heaven. Somebody was wearing a watch, and they dropped it out here 300 miles from in all direction from any civilization. But somebody was here, because here's the watch laying on the ground. And so when I look at the human creature and understand that one eye did not wait a million years for the other eye to evolve, no, the skull has two openings for eyes right out the bat. So we get two eyes to start with. And then you find out that all the other animals and all the other creatures, they also have eyes, two eyes. But what's that all about? All of a sudden, everybody's got two eyes? I thought we were evolving. How come how come some didn't evolve with six eyes? And one didn't, so so there's too much about the human body, the human nervous system, the human brain, the way it's all put together. It's way too complicated to have just by chance evolved.
I don't remember who did it, but it was one scientist that had looked at this and said that the idea of a human body just coming together by, you know, the miracle of evolution and the fact that everything would have to be lined up perfectly would be like, you know, a tornado going through a junkyard and all the junk firing itself up into the air in that tornado and then coming back down into a perfect jet. Like the odds are absolutely staggering.
Spray painted. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Because I like what one astronomer said. He was brilliant. He said the universe is not only stranger than you imagine, it's stranger than you can imagine.
Yeah, we don't have the wiring to imagine it just yet.
Yeah, there are things going on the planet Saturn today that people have no idea in the world, have never heard it. Stuff is going on Saturn right now that you've never been told. Things which are found on the moon that you've never been told. Things which are being found on Mars that you haven't been told.
Oh, I already know that.
And so I understand that it's this kind of knowledge, hidden knowledge. I call it the occult world. Occult simply means hidden. And the hidden word of knowledge, hidden from. You know, we're always going to school and we have to take a test and never realize where the word test comes from.
Oh, Kenneth, still here?
And how that has to do with law. And it has to do with sex. It is really quite a subject when you start breaking down words and terms and ideas and where they've come from. But for me, I prefer, because I've only been looking at it for 50 years, and I keep telling people I'm not the world's foremost authority on anything. I mean, I know how much I don't know. My God, there's a world of knowledge out there. You can go to any library in the world and sit and read till the day you die, and you need to come back 46 more times and not even scrape the surface of what's in one library, much less the world's libraries.
That's really the only way to gain any kind of knowledge in anything. I mean, because if you go out there with a preconceived notion of what something is, while you're looking into it, then you've got a biased opinion, and therefore you're not going to be able to really get down into what the truth of that subject would really be. So the type of mentality and the attitude that you're speaking about moving forward with that humble nature and understanding first, right off the bat, that there's a lot of things that we don't know, and we have to have that humility before we even try to seek these answers. Would you agree that that's really the best way to go about researching anything?
Yeah, but you have to remember, if Al Capone and his mob are running Chicago, and you're a detective, you know, you've got a wife and children, and you're going to be doing research on organized crime in Chicago, well, if you think you're serving the people, you better go back and think about it.
That's the home of the mafia.
Because if you are doing research and you're putting your nose where it don't belong, you can get hurt that way. I mean, the bottom line is, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so this is why today scientists and teachers who have been taught themselves in universities to get their degrees so they can get a work permit, so they can go out and get a job, and they want merely like a parrot. Like a parrot, they will tell you what they were told. They don't know. All they know is what they took the test, they got a job, and they get a paycheck to teach you what their masters who taught them, what they wanted them to know. And now they're teaching you. So I learned a long time ago that I'm not interested in what important people tell me. I'll do my own thinking. So for me, it's just my opinion. But when it comes to this subject of how did we get here, I've looked at all of the ancient texts, and I haven't gone through all of them.
This is the last one
I've always been interested in the occult. Occult is simply a word meaning hidden. And so much of our powers in this world and the way things work are hidden. And the more one understanding words is what you really need to start doing. You need to start doing your homework and understanding words. If you put an S in front of words, it becomes swords. And that's what words are. They're cutting. They can cause you great trouble. Humans are word control creatures. So we need to establish what words mean. Again, when we talk about law, there's a Roman maximum in law that says, for he that would be deceived, let him. Simply meaning, if you are so ignorant as to be deceived, then that's your business. That's your problem. So you need to do your homework and find out what words mean, especially in relation to law and government. Because there is a world of occultism that is operating today throughout the world, in which you use certain words, and when those words are used in a court, they don't mean the same thing at all. Understanding law and the words of law, there are two things that this planet has: water and earth, water and land. Consequently, there are two kinds of law: the law of the land and the law of water. You've heard the term law of the land, but in point of fact, that's precisely what this word means. Law.
Well, loves, that broadcasted that one first. I didn't know I was broadcasting the same one, but I hope y'all enjoyed it. If you did, y'all give me a thumbs up. Leave me a comment in the box after the stream. Come back and rewatch it if you want to rewatch it. And if y'all want me to do some more of this content, let me know. And if it's Queen, to bring it to you, because I love dropping knowledge. I love knowledge. Knowledge is power. You learn every day you wake up, you're going to learn something new. See, that's what it was. See, you can't always say that all white people are bad, because they're not. We all one anyway. We don't supposed to hate one another no way. We're supposed to love each other. We're not supposed to hate. God didn't put us here to hate each other. He put us here to be one. We need to be one so we can heal this land. That's the only way we're going to heal it, is if we come together. We'll never heal this world if we keep hating each other. Yeah, I'm sitting in the dark here. I know I'm black as hell, so y'all can't see me. But anyway, my loves, this your girl, Miss Queen. Always go within, so you never go without. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Holla at your girl, all right? I love you all. Y'all have a blessed night, Ashe.